We will be recording today's meeting. And the purpose of today's meeting is that we have a number of guest speakers today, and some talk with the Collins Centers. So now that we've called to order, I take a motion for acceptance of the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Jill, seconded by Curtis. By roll call vote, Bill Barber,
Yes.
Rachel Day,
Aye.
Curtis Barr, Joe V,
Aye.
Tom Dixon.
Aye.
Jeff Carlson's aye, Kelly Zepin,
Aye.
and Donna Martino.
Aye.
No, she
Oh,
can't.
that's right, she does not vote.
I can't, honorary.
Yeah, sorry about that. It's my first day, so it's all right.
It's okay.
All right. So we've already announced it's being recorded. We also distributed the minutes from the March sixth, 2024 meeting. So thanks to all of the volunteer minute takers. I know Bo has volunteered to take minutes today. Does anyone have any comments on the minutes?
I'm gonna abstain because I wasn't here for that.
Move approval.
Second.
Curtis moves approval, Rachel seconds. All in favor, Bo Barber,
Yes.
Rachel,
Aye.
Curtis,
Aye.
Jill's abstained, Tom,
Aye.
Kelly Steven.
Aye.
Aye, Jeff Carlson votes aye. All right, so that takes us to our first non-clerical part of the meeting. Where we have our first speakers. I know John Brescher is online, so sorry, John, we got to you really fast. It only took us like 3 minutes to get to you.
All good?
So for those who don't know, we've invited a number of folks that are either key staff members of the town, chairs of boards, or from other work groups. We've invited John Brescher to come today to talk to us. He was the chair of the previous government study committee, to share his thoughts a little bit. I know we sent some questions out in advance, just to put those into the record for everyone. The questions that were sent to them in advance included what works, what is good about our current government structure, what doesn't work so well, what do the voters of Nantucket value about open town meeting, your opinion on what benefits or problems might arise if Nantucket were to change the town council, or then any other thoughts or observations on the issue. So I think maybe we'll open it up to John for some remarks, and then maybe if we have any questions or thoughts that we want to share, it's probably the easiest way. Not to put you on the spot, John, but.
Happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. So yes, I chaired the last iteration of the Town Government Study Committee. When we looked at, just by quick way of background, and I know Curtis was on the committee as well with me. Just by quick way of background, we were charged with as part of government study, was not only looking at charter and sort of the minutia within the charter and perhaps technical amendments to the charter, but in a more sort of global sense or broader sense, how town government functioned. So when we wrote our report after a number of years of meeting, it covered a lot of bases. And one of the highlights that we had was that we found that folks were really passionate about town meeting, and both passionate for the open form of town government, and passionate about saying this form doesn't suit us anymore. It doesn't work. Collectively, sort of as a committee, we did not make a recommendation as to saying, hey, we need to change this form of town government. We punted and said, hey, we think that this is a topic that deserves further study and a more specific and focused study. And so we specifically looked at sort of representative town meeting as sort of a logical step, but we didn't come to a conclusion saying that, oh, the town really needs to change the form of government. But it was something that was always in our that came up during our discussions, and certainly a topic of interest for everyone. So that being said, going through the questions that your committee has sort of asked us about what works and what is good about our current government structure, I think on its very nature, it's open democracy. You know, everybody gets a say. And in that sense, it is fantastic. It is quite literally a way for the people's voices to be heard at town meeting. Everyone gets a chance to speak. Everyone gets a say, and there is a tremendous benefit of that for sort of a when you think about us as a community and that everybody can be invested in this island and in the community as a whole. Now, what doesn't work so well, it's a double-edged sword, because while it's great that we have everybody gets a chance to speak and everybody has an opinion and can speak at these town meetings, it also, we run into an issue with voters and participants at town meeting not being as well informed about the issues and the warrant articles as we might otherwise hope. Town meeting in recent years has felt like more of a forum, more of an educational forum to learn about the topics at the hearing, instead of voters doing their homework months in advance, or emailing town employees, committee members, town officials, whomever. We're all, I say this collectively, like, we're all accessible. And it's okay to ask questions. It's good to ask questions. And the better informed you can be as a voter about the issues, the more efficient and more robust the debate will be. It really, if there's one thing that I took away from the last few town meetings and excuse me, all of our study, it's that education and sort of issue education, voter education, civic education, however you want to phrase it, is absolutely paramount in making sure that we have logical, informed decisions moving forward. So does that say that open town meeting doesn't foster that? No, not necessarily, but there are more sort of, there seems to be a prevalence of more uninformed voters, and as a result, it bogs down the process. And along that same line of reasoning, one of the challenges of open town meeting is that it is our legislative process, which is cool, but it's incredibly inefficient in that, and I know Curtis and I we talked about this a bunch during our in the last committee. The airport was the prime example, that there are instances where there needs to be some sort of legislative speed. And they may come up every now and then, but they are important. And waiting once a year to pass the budget, or twice if we have a special town meeting, is not always the most efficient way to do things. And it's a cool form of government, but at times it feels as though it has outgrown our community's problems and budget and sort of legislative needs have outgrown the once a year or maybe twice a year meeting. And then the question was, what do the voters of Nantucket value about open town meeting? The ability to speak freely. I think that there is a tremendous value in that. I think that those who spoke, so during our committee, we had 2 public forums, and to be honest, they were not really well attended. We did them in the summer. We had a handful. The first one we had a handful of people. The second one we had more, and it was a nice mix of summer residents and year-round residents. And it was really interesting that there are some who will absolutely die on the hill of town meeting. That is the greatest form of democracy, and that it's so critical for everybody to have a chance to voice their opinion and speak freely at these meetings and have a direct say in the legislative process. If we go to town council, so if we go to town council, I think I think the way that I look at it is that if we go to town council, we are sacrificing sort of the direct democracy for efficiency. And I mean, that may be a very simple way to put it, but I think that there are tremendous benefits of going to town council. I think that there are ways that it can work. I think sort of creatively, and I hate to go back to this concept, but if we can educate the voters and educate the electorate and say, hey, you're not really going to be giving up the rights that you fear that you're going to lose by going to the council form of government. You'll still have a chance to speak. You'll still have a chance to go to the meetings. And you'll still be apprised of all the legislative issues. I think that it makes a lot of sense that for an efficiency standpoint. I also think that it's that it would be, I think it would be an interesting format if you can sort of figure out how to divvy up the council members. And again, in our committee, we never got as far as a council. We looked at representative town government, and frankly, what happened was we got stymied by the idea of drawing up districts. Once it was too easy for us to say, throw up our hands and say, well, that's gonna be too hard to figure out. We really can't go too much further on that. I think council could be really interesting in that it would be efficient. I think it would streamline a lot of processes. I don't necessarily know that you would be sacrificing as much of the democratic process as people would fear. But at the end of the day, I think it's interesting that sort of town meeting would have to effectively vote to disband itself. And as with so many things here, it's really educating the voters and the electorate on what this would look like, what rights they'll still retain, and sort of the mechanics of how it would work in practice. Because I think that trying to get everyone to understand that, because everybody, when they hear council or representative or mayor or whatever, will have preconceived notions. And to a certain degree, I think it's exciting that the town has the opportunity to sort of to make a change and come into something new. But we don't know exactly what that'll look like. And I think that if that's the way that we wind up going, we collectively as a town, I think that education and just explaining to people, this is what it will look like, this is how it would work in practice, and this is how it will work in theory. I think that's going to be absolutely critical for any type of success and for any type of buy-in.
Awesome. Thanks. Anyone have any questions for John or discussion points? Jill?
Did you all thanks, John, and thanks for
You're welcome.
sharing all that. You spent years on those committees, and we know you know a lot more than that, and we probably need to have you back for when we dive in even deeper here. But did you all look at, I know you didn't get too deep into it, but when you talked about dividing up the island in terms of districts, I'm sure that was, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure.
I don't know if that's where
Absolutely.
this group will land. We haven't talked about that as much, but.
No, absolutely. So the idea came up because we went to Falmouth, and we spoke with their, excuse me, town clerk and town manager. And it was really interesting. It was Curtis, myself, and Linda Williams. We went there, and we got to hear sort of the history of how they came up with representative town meeting. And just by way of anecdote, what happened was back that there was a single issue, and it was involving commercial zoning. And basically the employer was able to pack the room with the voters, and they voted in favor of the zoning change. And after that, the town of Falmouth said, hey, that's shenanigans, can't do that. And they changed to representative town meeting immediately thereafter. So the punchline in all of this was that happened in 1930. So they've been doing it.
Small town meeting.
So the interesting part of it though is that they have it divided into precincts. And while we were hearing this, sort of our minds were spinning about how we would be able to draw up the island into precincts. And they had a significant number of precincts. I mean, I think they had something like 212 representatives total. So they had quite a few precincts there. And we were stymied by the idea of how you draw up a precinct, given our seasonal nature, you know, how registered voters are dispersed throughout the island without gerrymandering. We just thought about it and almost threw up our hands and say, that is a darn hard thing to try to figure out. We should wait for census numbers, et cetera. And because, as you know, Linda Williams correctly pointed out, she said, you know, if you tried to draw up Surfside, You could have Surfside North, Surfside West, Surfside East, and Surfside South, and they'll all have different interests, all have sort of different personalities. And with that, I think I can speak for the group and say it was a task that we were not equipped to handle at that time.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
Anyone else?
All right, very much.
All right, Donna,
You're on mute.
you're on mute still.
John, thank you for sharing that. I think it's very helpful for us to hear, what you folks, have spent hours working on in the previous committee. One thing you mentioned, and I guess I need a clarification, folks. Curtis, at one point you said that the difference, between town council and, annual town meeting is that non-voting taxpayers have a greater voice and more opportunity to speak during town council meetings rather than at the annual town council. And I'm
That's
wondering,
absolutely
John,
correct.
pardon?
That's correct, because
That is correct. Okay.
anyone can go to the town council like I did to Barnstable and walk in and speak for 3 minutes, hopefully. But non-voting taxpayers cannot go through the door at annual town meeting. They can go up to the strangers gallery, but they cannot sit on the floor and vote.
Okay,
And
so
if you go
in
to a
terms,
town council as a summer person, you won't be able to vote, but you can go in there and make your concerns heard. And the important thing is, if a town council meets in July and August, when you're here, you're gonna be able to get to them. If town meeting meets when no one's here, you're never gonna be heard. So that's one of the arguments that I have for this town council approach.
Mr. Chair.
thank you. And if, I'm sorry, I haven't, may I continue?
Did-
Chair,
1 second, I recognize Tom. We'll come back to you, Donna.
okay,
I would say that any non-registered voter can come to select board and make comments as anybody can. And as long as the chair recognizes them, we had a couple folks from Sconset come in a couple months ago about the bluff, the maintenance of the bluff path and how that's town and the private neighbors working together and the maintenance of that and all the issues. Also, non-voting taxpayers can speak on the floor of town meeting. They just need pre-approval from the moderator. And I don't know, I think we're gonna have Sarah in and you can get into that, but that there definitely is a mechanism for that. So I just wanted to throw those two things out there.
What happened?
thank you, Tom. Can I continue, Jeff, or?
Sure, Donna. Yep,
Okay,
absolutely.
so going back to John, to your discussion of open democracy, I think if we kind of take that a little further, when you have the non-voting taxpayers, you have 2 days of ATM versus what, how many town council meetings a month? You have a very wide open democracy. There's so many opportunities throughout the year to speak versus 2 days. Is that true then? Anybody?
You're asking me that question?
Yeah, John, I mean, if you're talking about open democracy, wouldn't it be possible if you have town council meetings twice a month for 10 months versus 2 days of ATMs? Isn't that more of an opportunity for more people to get involved in our government?
In theory,
I think we're
absolutely.
coming to that conclusion, actually. It sounds like it for me anyway.
In theory, it can be, but I mean, I guess this too is sort of the interesting part where it's, I think to a degree, because if the town changes to a council form of government, to a degree, they're going to somewhat write the rules for how many meetings, et cetera. And so it can be as sort of robust or not as they see fit.
Mhm.
So as with all great questions, the lawyerly answer is maybe. It depends.
Thank you, John.
Curtis?
I just want to agree with Tom. There was never a question that you can't go to a select board meeting and speak at public comment. But I see a little difference in standing up before the town council, which is gonna vote a legislative function, whereas speaking to the select board and offering your opinion still is subject then to the annual meeting to take action as a legislature. But you're welcome to go to the select board, as I will tonight to speak.
I too have spoken a number of times at the select board, yes. It's very helpful.
And Mr. Chair, I would just add that there's also citizen warrant articles, of course. Like so that it all works in tandem together.
So I had a quick question. John, could you take a minute and describe the town government study committee, what your original tasking and kind of process was that generated your final report?
Oh,
Good luck.
You're welcome.
yeah. PTSD. So our original task was to examine the charter, and in so many ways see if Nantucket's form of government, if it functions properly. And so under that very sort of large umbrella, I'd say that we focused on three things. The one was sort of very simple, tangible and technical changes to the charter itself. I believe one of the, just as an example, I believe one of the changes we recommended, I think was implemented, was the length of the term of the moderator. That it's be every 3 years instead of every single year. Sort of little, for lack of a better term, low-hanging fruit that nobody was really going to have any issues with per se. Again, sort of good governance, technical changes. Fine. Then we had some other recommendations about, call it the mechanics of the government. I believe one suggestion after meeting with Libby and folks in town admin and Amy Baxter was to set up a licensing board. Recommend to the select board that say, hey, you are empowered to do X, Y, and Z. We don't want to put this in the charter. We shouldn't put this in the charter, but you have the ability to make certain changes that will improve what we think will improve the efficiency of sort of the day-to-day operations of the town. And then we looked at it from sort of a much more, of like the 5,000-foot view, and said, okay, is open town meeting serving the residents of Nantucket as the best form of government? And that's where I don't think we came to a consensus as on a committee, other than to say it was a topic that deserved its own committee, and that that there should be, I hate to use the phrase task force, but there should be sort of a directed committee to solely study this issue, and A, if it should be warranted, and B, how you would implement it.
Right.
Sure, Rachel.
John, I read that report and you referenced the 2020 census. Can you just elaborate a little bit outside of just access to like a council form, since some of the forms are population based? Was that the only reason why you were kind of turfing it till after that was completed, or was there more to it in that conversation?
No, I think that really was about it. I mean, because we were never anticipating that we were going to have the population for a mayor, but it was a piece of the puzzle, so to speak, in terms of, hey, if we're going to look at other forms of government, what are the numbers for registered voters? What are we actually looking at? And then during the 2020 census, as we progressed along the representative town meeting line of thinking and thinking about districts, we thought, oh man, wouldn't that be cool if we could find out where everybody, where we could potentially draw those districts. It never got to that, but that was part of the thinking and sort of the reasoning for looking at census numbers.
Yeah, three things. To John's point, the town government study committee recommendations are including the one that John mentioned about changing the moderator's term is on the 2024 May 7th warrant as Article 82.
Again,
Mhm.
because it was on last year and the legislature never acted on it. Went up to Boston, they sat on it.
Well, there are 12 home rule petitions, and Nantucket files more home rule petitions than any city or town in the
But
Commonwealth.
this isn't the first time it was on the warrant. It's
And the second one would be, as to John's point on the licensing board. So currently the select board is doing a pilot program. Instead of doing our licensing and petitions on Wednesday nights, which we usually do, depending on when they come up and Amy brings them to us, we have separated out one meeting a month for only license and petitions. And that is a Monday it's every, I think it's second Monday at 11 a.m. And that is a pilot to possibly recommend through the select board, possibly, we haven't deliberated on this, a charter change to go to a licensing board, as John mentioned. So that is another recommendation that we have incorporated. And then to John's point on a city and all the things that come with. And I know it's a little off in the weeds. We didn't really get into that, but per the 2020 census, we have the population now to be a city. So that is, kind of, I don't want to get off into, I know we had this conversation on kind of where the committee's going and should we stick to the letter of what Curtis's article was, et cetera, et cetera. But that is another thing that we could take a look at if that was the will of the committee and that's where we're going. So I just wanted to throw that out there. The requirement is plus 12,000 and the census is about 14,500 or whatever it was in 2020.
I think Rachel had a thought.
Yeah, I just have one more question. John, you spoke about the passion that a lot of people had either to keep or not, and it was, I mean, I think we're still seeing that now. My understanding with Barnstable being a council, and I believe Curtis has brought it up before, that they still do a little bit with a actual annual town meeting. If Nantucket were to move more to a council, I didn't see much about, I saw the representative reference in the report, but if there was a move to like the council and there was some way to obtain the town meeting floor mechanism so that people had a voice still in that manner, do you think that would address some of that passion for people who were hoping to keep town meeting that you heard? Or is it truly that they can hit a yes or no button for vote?
So to be honest with you, I feel like our sample size from these public forums was really small. I mean, I'm guessing, Curtis, please feel free to correct me, but I feel like we had like 30 people, maybe. And of those we had, maybe 5 to 10 were die on the hill of open town meeting. Don't you dare take any of my rights away. I will defend this to my dying breath. And I don't know. I think there are going to be some that's just how they're going to feel no matter what. I'd like to think that there's a larger middle that if you present an idea or present sort of this theory or concept and say, hey, this is a way that we can sort of have the best of both worlds. And again, sort of circling back to the original point of educating and explaining to people how this could work or how it would work. I'd like to think you'd get a lot of buy-in. I mean, I know I'd buy it, but I'd like to think that you would get more of this sort of silent middle that's out there.
Just to clarify your question, the Barnstable town meeting is by petition. That is, you have your council, but if citizens want a town meeting on an issue, as they did recently, you petition, and then they will call for a town meeting on that subject. Well, they'll call for a town meeting, but generally it's focused on a subject.
Yeah.
And that's what they did recently.
It's 300 votes.
Yeah, but people who feel a passion about something like that can call a town meeting in Barnstable.
Which I think, sorry,
Nope,
said,
go ahead. I know Carolyn had a comment.
just to follow, I just think that that helped solve some of those concerns, and John even mentioned it, of people packing the town meeting room for one subject and then a mass exodus. And I
Yeah.
think we see that a lot.
Oh, haven't
So
we?
there might make sense if we have like the short-term rental conversation or something else, like if there was a town meeting just focused on that, it might truly flesh out the issue that most people are going for, and then you have a lot of the other, not to say mundane, but maybe not as passionate, a lot of impactful people who are not there to do
Doing
the
the
other votes
business.
that might be for the council. So that's,
You have that option.
My-
It's very important to emphasize that that option to call a town meeting is available.
now is it only by petition? Because that part I know, but could the council call it as well?
No, I think Bo, isn't it?
No, I think it's,
It's just.
they've only called one, I believe, and that was because they had this hot button issue of, the wind farms going through
Gotcha.
various areas, and they called town meeting, it was just for discussion, there was no voting or anything,
Okay.
just a,
Like a discussional forum, yeah.
pretty much, everyone got 4 minutes, they lined everybody up, each person had their thing, they said it, and then that was the meeting.
Thank you.
Carolyn?
I just wanted to follow up, Tom, with some questions about what you had said. I was curious why you think that why is it that Nantucket has the most home rule petitions of any, place in Massachusetts?
Why exactly? Well, as you know, I worked for our state reps office for a while. So I was sort of in charge of, well, somewhat of handling the kind of administrative part on that. I think because we have a lot of uniquenesses about us. HDC, we do a lot of land swaps. From conservation to conservation, there's a lot of Article 97 stuff, which needs a 2/3 vote of each house of the legislature. There's been as many as 4 of those at a time. I don't think there's a lot of other communities, maybe Jeff knows who does a lot of those.
No.
Town to land bank, town to conservation foundation, like that kind of stuff. So really the numbers are, I wouldn't say inflated, it's not the right word, but it isn't like 10 charter changes at once or something like that.
And what happens to that if we move to a town council that still exists? It's a separate thing.
Yeah, it would be this, but instead of town meeting affirming, it would be town council.
Council. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Jill?
I was just gonna add that for the town meetings that we have, I think we have the most citizen warrant articles, so. I think I
Yeah.
can say that, because I think I've heard town council say that before,
Yeah.
like other small communities with town meetings,
30 articles.
20, I mean,
What
and
do
there, we have
make out-
120.
What do you make out of that? What is it about Nantucket that creates that?
I don't know, maybe just because that's the tradition and it's starting, people feel comfortable doing it, like they've been doing it for so long. It's a pretty low threshold to get your article on, which
Yeah.
I don't love. I think.
But
it
one
should be
third
higher
of them
than
are
that.
zoning. That's the other
Yeah,
problem.
we
We
control
should
zoning.
segregate zoning from town meeting and licensing. I think that's a great move, what they're doing. But when you look at your warrant article, at your warrant, 1/3 of the 34 zoning articles last warrant. Out of
So in
107.
addition to what the planning board puts forward, because they control the zoning articles, you can put forward something for your property or your community or your neighborhood or wherever, so you can do that too. And there was a lot of that over the years.
Mhm.
I think a little less of that now, but maybe that's just the cycle we're in.
Just one other question.
Sure,
for Tom. You were saying that, with the 2020 census would allow for us to consider being a city. So I just want to clarify, how would that change our task?
That might be a question for Anthony later.
Yeah.
He,
For the
Yeah.
company.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's not a whole, something I know how the mechanism for that works.
Okay.
One more thing, sorry, can I ask John a question?
Sure, absolutely.
John, you've been to a lot of town meetings and you've evaluated them too. Do you have a comment on why you think we have so many more than other people as well? I'd love your perspective.
Oh, mine? Oh.
Yeah, yeah, why we have more
Um,
citizen articles or zoning articles. Or-
Sure. I think that I can give you a very sort of a sort of macro answer that I think that it's a real testament to our, and this is very sort of optimistically speaking, but it's a testament to our community that we're all so invested and they all want to try to improve it in certain ways. And so I think there's a lot of civic engagement and citizen engagement that way of trying to sort of tinker with certain issues. The cynic in me also says that zoning is the gift that keeps on giving, that we constantly tweak it every single year, whether it be through technical amendments to the bylaw, or whether they be substantive amendments, or whether they be zoning changes. You know, it's really interesting looking back on how the island was zoned in the 1970s, when in 1972 when zoning came into existence, and how it has changed over the last, oh gosh, what are we, 50 years. And that we're constantly tweaking and tweaking and tweaking and saying, oh, well, remember residential commercial? Well, we got to get rid of all of those. And now we got to get rid of those piecemeal. We can't do it all at once. And it just, it on one side of the coin is that we're constantly trying to improve our island through zoning and mechanisms that way. And the other is that, boy, you know, we should have probably gotten it right the first time, but we didn't have the foresight back then.
Yeah.
I might also add to that, a number of our articles too relate to sewer districting and extensions into there. And Nantucket is, especially in the Cape and Islands, much further ahead in sewer and sewer expansion.
Yeah.
And I know there's usually a handful every year of those that come in as well, to add on to, but they get lumped into zoning, all that fun stuff. All right. I know we run over on your time, John, and I definitely appreciate the time. Does anyone else have any more questions for John? I know our next speaker has not responded to my message yet or shown up yet, so I don't know where Brian is, so.
Yeah. We're too busy getting ready for town meeting.
with all those warrant articles, that's
Right.
it takes up to so much time.
He gets out of them.
Let's hear it before. John, do you have a few more minutes or do you need to get going?
Sure, I'll chat. Kids are at the dentist. I got all the time in the world.
We'll keep you
Don't
here
you
as
feel
long
like
as,
you're at the
as,
dentist?
as possible then.
I'm not at the dentist. Jesse's at the dentist.
So, yeah. So, I guess since they're here and it's kind of a unique opportunity, if no one's opposed, does anyone from the public have any questions for John? Our faithful attendees?
Yeah.
Just raise your hand. Right. Lucy, correct?
Sure, yeah, we had her, yeah. Hi, John, thanks for being here. So a couple of questions. When you were when you were involved in the town study, like, did you evaluate how you could improve the open town meeting?
Lucy, it's a good question. Not real. I mean, I hate to harp on this, but like the theme, the real takeaway that I think we got as a committee was educating the public. And
Right.
that's what it all came back to. And that sort of the more comprehensive of an education that the public has as it relates to both the warrant articles and the process and the mechanics of government in general, the smoother everything runs. And it's one of those awful, I hate to use this phrase, but it's, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make him drink it. And so there are opportunities available for the public to educate themselves, and the town avails themselves of that. And they do a really wonderful job. I mean, how early the warrant is printed, having meetings available via YouTube, on Zoom, in public. And again, so many of these committees, you can contact the elected officials, you can contact appointed officials. There, there are email addresses available. B, there's usually a staff person running these things. C, we all basically know each other. You can see each other in the Stop and Shop, see each other on Main Street, getting coffee, whatever. Ask questions, be inquisitive. It's okay to ask these questions and to find out more, because the more you know, the better informed you can be, and say, hey, and come up with questions or ideas that other people may not have thought about. And again, the tools are there. It's just trying to nudge the general electorate and say, hey, we can all be better at this. And so, and the better we are, the better government runs in general.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on that?
Sure, go ahead, Lucy.
Yeah, So like, is there a chart available, like the way the government works right now, the town government works right now? And then is there a chart available that if it was under a town council or town representative, is there? And where would I find that?
We have that in our packet, we have it in our package today, don't we? Today,
So
Yeah, I believe so.
organizational chart?
can I, if I can just chime in quickly on that, there's an organizational chart. And so I think, so Lucy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're looking at two separate things. One is that we have an organizational chart that town administration has prepared. It's not quite a flow chart, but it really is just an org chart of sort of who's in charge and who reports to whom, different departments, et cetera. Cool. The other side to that is how, yeah, sort of going back to like how a bill becomes a law with the capital steps, those wonderful kids songs. Like, I don't know that there is anything that necessarily is sort of a flow chart that way. There may be sort of the town meeting rules and procedures that are available at each town meeting. Sarah might be able to answer that question a little better than I can. But I don't know that it's a phenomenal question. And interestingly, I don't think during our tenure of the last government study committee, I don't think anybody ever asked that, believe it or not, that we have sort of a flow chart or some way to say, hey, I want to change the zoning at my property. How do I do it? And it doesn't say, oh, well, first you need to get, enough number of citizen petitions, or it goes under a planning board warrant article and the steps that follow. And that may be something that's really important moving forward, that the clerk can provide.
All right, Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Also, John, it's Jill, sorry. How much do you think though on the voters maybe not feel like they're not informed enough? How much of that though do you think is a process related question where they're so overwhelmed by committees and appointments and when those committees meet and finding the name of the committee specifically so that you find it in YouTube, it's not that, even though there is a lot of information, it's not that easy. There is not one email that goes out Monday and says every committee that meets and who's on it and what they're meeting about and linking. They don't do that, which to me is disappointing that the town doesn't try to compile a few more things. Like if you were having a public hearing, it'd been nice to know rather than like, I read about it in the paper after or something,
It's a great point, because even sort of those who are sophisticated within sort of the realm of municipal government may not entirely know who has the authority over what. And it sort of goes back to Lucy's point, actually, about sort of how can you find out? And so like who's in charge of this? How do I find out that this committee is going on, that they're going to be talking about X, Y, and Z? I don't know. It's a good question, because I don't know how much confusion falls into it and people are just sort of disaffected and say, you know what, this is too confusing. Forget all this nonsense. I'll find out when it comes to me at town meeting, and I'll figure it out then. I don't know, really. I haven't heard that, but I'm not going to pretend that my finger's on the pulse of the community in that sense.
Yeah, I feel like I just hear that a lot, that people feel a little overwhelmed by.
That's fair.
All right, I'm gonna give the last question to Mr. Gilletti since he had his hands up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, John, hi, Ted Gilletti here. I also feel that it is a very daunting exercise for many of the residents. It really is overwhelming. First off, especially these days, people are really stretched in terms of employment issues. Some of them working 2 or 3 jobs. So it's gotten increasingly difficult, but trying to get through the overwhelming number of warrant articles, trying to decipher them, most people don't really understand it. They just don't. And it really is a serious education process. I think a lot of people are just so challenged by it that it puts them off, unless they've got a special interest and then they're pursuing that particular issue. Even the town website is also difficult to navigate, to find things, and it takes quite a lot of looking around, searching to find things. And if you're not particularly skillful with technology, it's also difficult. And I think that having a town meeting where you have, let's say, 35, 40 pages or even more perhaps of warrant articles, it means it's gonna go on for 1 or 2 days. And, you know, who can spend that amount of time in one block to attend town meeting? That's the challenge. And maybe there needs to be more frequent town meetings dealing with more focused issues. And maybe that's the solution. And I also think that, for example, you had the 2 groups that you met dealing with government reorganization. And you said you had what, maybe 30 people, 20 people in attendance. I think part of the issue there probably is most people had no idea that you were even having those hearings, those meetings.
I mean, all we can do is advertise on the town's website, advertise in the paper, and we had them twice. I mean, we had it twice during the summer, and you know,
So-
it's
I think we have to
What it
work
is.
on all of us. That's what I think the issue is. That's, I think for me is the bottom line. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, John, I think we're gonna let you off the hook.
Cool.
Our other 2
Bye.
speakers are here now.
all right.
Thank you, John.
Thank
So thank you.
Thank you,
for the time.
guys. Thank you for all the work you do. Appreciate it.
Good luck at the dentist.
Yeah, thanks.
Jesse.
No problem. All right, so next up on our schedule, I know we've been blessed and had Brian and Sarah show up right around at the same time. But to kind of continue with the order of our agenda, up next, we have Brian Turbot to do the same thing. So I think to kick off, Brian, if you could, maybe take a second to introduce yourself and kind of discuss your role in the town.
Sure. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So my name is Brian Turbot. I'm the Director of Municipal Finance. My role in the town is management and oversight of all accounting, budget preparation, tax rate setting, certification of free cash, which can be used at budget meetings or special town meeting or annual town or special town meetings. We manage all the borrowings that are authorized by the special or annual town meetings. So basically, all financial transactions fall under my purview and run through my office.
Excellent. So as with our last speaker, I know we sent out some questions in advance from the committee that we've been kind of running through. So if everyone's okay, I'll just kind of run through them with them
Yeah.
and see his responses. So the first question we had is, what works, what is good about our current government structure?
I mean, I think I've always been fairly impressed from when I started in town government, you know, almost 15 years ago in another community with the open town meeting, because I think it encourages a more diverse and a larger participation. I certainly think that it gives a wider breadth of people the ability to all gather together to hear opinions and observations and discuss articles and of importance to the town. I think that I personally think it's the purest form of democracy that we have in many ways, and I think it does work well. But I also, if I move on to the other part of this, which is in my head, Jeff, is what doesn't work so well is I think that the amount of time, you know, 2 or 3 days certainly puts a strain on a lot of people, or trying to do it on a Saturday puts a strain on people, especially in this community, with the timing of the annual town meeting, with people's attendance, and it certainly does make for long days. It's a lot of work internally with the budget preparation and the warrant development as well, but I think those are all pieces that we would have to be doing regardless of the type of government structure that we had.
Excellent. So just to kind of skip down, because you just touched on it. Do you think that there would be any benefits or problems in changing to a town council structure?
I mean, there may be some marginal benefits from my perspective, from a financial perspective. But I don't necessarily, I'm not of the opinion that there would be a large, tremendous amount of greater enhanced benefits from the financial perspective. And what I mean is at annual town meeting, annual town meeting authorizes the borrowings, they authorize budget transfers, they authorize, free cash transfers. If town council were to be the form of government, whatever the number of town council members they are would be the legislative body that would administer those, but I don't know that it would be marginally better. I think that we could accomplish, if we've been able to call special town meetings, I think maybe only one thing that I would consider if I was going to stick with an open town meeting would be modifying the quorum requirements to make it a little easier to transact and conduct business. I think that from my perspective, from a financial perspective, the benefits would be marginal. To be honest with you, I don't know that we would gain a tremendous amount of more flexibility at all. I mean, we would still be going to the council for the votes, and I still think that there's value in bringing budgets and these things to the people as a whole.
Excellent. So with that, does anyone have questions for Brian? Jill?
Yeah, Brian, on that, so how would that work for you for budgeting? Would you still do everything? Like, would you want to do it all at once at the town council, or would you just be doing it every week or every 2 weeks as you needed it? Like, I don't know if it's permanent. Date,
That's
but that would
actually,
make the timeline a lot.
that's a really good question, and I think that would probably be something that would most likely be vetted and sorted out, but I suspect that the budget would be, the timeline would probably be the same. Now, the one flexibility that I see with going to a town council is the timing of bringing project requests that have borrowing authorizations or things of that nature attached to them. May change the dynamics of how some of the other committees approach their work. If they even existed, I don't know if a capital program committee would still exist in the town council form of government, but say for instance, it did. That may change, Jill, I think a little bit to answer your question, but timing wise, I mean, it may move things out a little bit or spread some of it out, but it's not going to change the amount of work that we have to do. It just may have a smoothing effect, but like I said, we certainly can call special town meeting. The select board can now, I believe, can call special town meetings anytime that they're necessary. So I don't know if the benefits that would accrue from a town council for me would be so substantial that it would be a change that I would tell you is absolutely necessary.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions for Brian? Sure, Rachel.
Brian, can you just explain what you mean by modify the quorum requirements? Would you drop it or increase it?
Well, a lot of communities, I think, across the Commonwealth that have open town meetings have faced the issue with getting, especially for not so much, Rachel, to your question about an annual, but special town meetings typically have different quorum requirements for appropriation bills and things of that nature, which certainly can make it a little bit more difficult. And as a matter of reference, my community that I just came from is having this very discussion, and they're considering changing their quorum requirements to make it easier to be able to conduct the meetings. So I think that is something that if we were sticking with an open town meeting type of government, that would probably be something that would be discussed. Because there was one town meeting that I recall that we didn't have enough of a quorum to act on financial articles that we were putting forward, and they had to be postponed until the annual. So that would really be the only benefit accrual, I think, in a lot of ways that would accrue for financial purposes would be that a town council would be able to act on those a little bit differently, but I don't know if that's such a tremendous accrual of benefit from my perspective for me that it would be the way that I would want to go. From my own personal opinion, not speaking for town administration or anyone.
Sure, Carolyn.
Hi, Brian, it's Caroline Baltzler. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how to make town meeting, how we could make it more accessible. We had Mr. Giletti talking about how it was overwhelming, the processes of how the town government works in the meeting. Do you have any thoughts from your perspective about how it could be streamlined? Just curious.
Are you talking about the run up to town meeting itself, or I'm just to make sure I answer your question correctly or give you something that you can work with?
Town meeting itself.
I mean, I think that town meeting is a pretty passionate place, so I don't know I don't know if there's a lot that we could do to streamline it, to be honest with you. I mean, I think why I think it's such a great form is that it gives everybody a voice and it gives everybody the opportunity to hear all those voices. And, you know, I, as much as the next person, don't necessarily like to sit there for 2 or 3 days at a time or all day Saturday. But I think I don't know that we could streamline it any better because it gives everybody an opportunity to be heard on the issues. And I think that that's really critical, that people are able to be heard, and that gives them a voice. And, you know, so I don't know how we would streamline it to be better. I mean, there might be things that we could do to be able to encourage more active participation. A lot of times people have talked about, you know, babysitting services and things of that nature. I mean, I don't know if those are things that town administration should consider doing or seeing if there's a solution to do that, but they may be things that could make it easier for people to participate, but streamlining it, I think, I know the moderator's on and this isn't because she's here, but I think the moderator does a great job keeping the meeting efficient and moving effectively and as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
I have just a quick follow-up to that, Brian. Do you find that you get a lot of active participation in the lead up to town meeting through FinCom or citizens that come into your office with questions about the town budget?
I think we get a lot of active participation, depending on the articles on the warrant in any given year. But I think there's a lot of interest in the warrant. I think there's a lot of interest in articles, and I think on some articles, there's an awful lot of active participation through attendance at FinCom and observations. And then I think that there are some concerned citizens and taxpayers that wait to go to town meeting to take that active participation role.
Sure.
But I think we do see a lot of participation, Jeff.
Okay, excellent. All right, Jill?
Yeah, I think the citizen warrant articles reflect more participation than people realize. But having said that, and maybe Brian or Sarah can weigh in on this, we often do get citizen warrant articles that can never be implemented. And so there is a part of me that's like, why do we even allow them to be printed, allowed? Like, if town council says that they don't mean anything, then why are we voting on them? And like, that's an area where maybe there could be more efficient, because this year, I can't think of how many, but at least, I can think of at least 3, but I think there's more than that.
I'll leave it to Sarah to explain why we're acting on them at town meeting. But the comment that our observation that I would make to that is that, you know, I think it's more encouragement of suggesting and highly, you know, reminding people that town council is available to every citizen that wants to draft an article, and finding a way to get them to engage with town council to ensure that it can be done or that the wording is correct to make the article potentially actionable. But I also think that when we're putting a citizen article forward, we need to completely understand what the ability and authority of the legislative body is versus the ability of the select board in some of these things. So I don't know how you get all the way there, Jill, but I mean, I do understand your point, and I think it starts with, you know, encouraging people, if you're considering doing a warrant article, to consult with town council, so to either understand whether it can be done, or if it can't be done, why not, and to try to solve the problem or solve the issue or question in the beginning, not after it's been submitted.
Yeah, I mean, one of my problems with it is that, like, this year, 3 of them, I mean, some people might think they're very controversial. They might take up a lot of time. And yet, enacted, they mean nothing. Like, nothing will happen. So that might, I don't know how much time it'll cost us this year. I don't know if it'll cost us 10 minutes or an hour, but it could cost us that much time. And that's what I think is some of the problem for people coming in town meeting.
All right, Carolyn?
I'm just thinking that town meeting is a place where the voters are all airing stuff out, and even in an inefficient case where it didn't get screened properly by select board or
No,
town.
that's not how it works, but okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry for my ignorance, but just still, the fact that someone can come and air out a thing that then, yes, it won't have a chance of getting passed, but it's still a way for the citizenry to hear what's going on.
Yeah, no, it could pass. It's not allowed. You can't,
It's not implementable.
It's non-binding.
they're
Right.
called non-binding articles and you can't enforce it.
Understood.
And so it's fine. People can still stand up at town meeting and say whatever the heck they want, whether there's that article to debate or not. You don't need their article on the warrant if we know it's non-binding. That we don't need it on the warrant to kind of endorse what they want to talk about. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I think we've been overly generous to allow a lot of non-binding articles that take up a lot of time.
All right, Bill.
Yeah, Brian, thanks for being on. Bill Barber. Can you explain what happens when a free transfer article fails a town meeting?
When a what?
When a free transfer, a free cash transfer appropriation bill fails at town meeting?
Well, any financial article that fails at town meeting, well, especially with free cash, if the article or a particular item, I guess I'd have to use kind of an example, Bo, to kind of really explain this, but if there's an article to say authorize the purchase of a piece of equipment and it's funded by free cash and the article fails, then the purchase of the equipment utilizing free cash would not be allowed.
Okay, now what if the money is already spent?
Well, the only way to appropriate free cash is through the legislative body. So an annual or a special town meeting are the only ways to appropriate free cash. So there's no legal authority to spend free cash without the appropriation, which we put forward every year for appropriations to spend. Or transfers of previously approved articles to new articles where that funding source may have been free cash.
Okay. All right, in the interest of time, and I know we are a little bit
Jeff,
ahead.
Donna Martino has her hand up, just to let you know.
Oh,
All right, John, go ahead. Thanks, Brian.
okay, thank you. Brian, given your years of experience in your position, and you gave us an advantage of annual town meeting, but can you foresee of a disadvantage if we move into town council? Given your experience, what do you think?
That's a great question. I don't know that I see disadvantages to it, Donna, to be honest with you. I don't know that. I think in thinking through how appropriations are done at annual town meeting versus how they potentially could be done, in my opinion, at a town council, I don't know that the benefits would be the accrued benefits of changing that any flexibility would be so greatly increased that I would be jumping up and down saying we have to do it. Like I said, in some respects, being able to go on a more frequent basis may be a great benefit, but it could be a great drawback where it just is not. I don't know that it would be such a great benefit to me to be able to go every week to do something versus doing it at annual town meeting right now. I think that the system that we're using does provide the flexibility that we need, but granted, a town council with more regular meetings would provide us some flexibility, but I don't know if it would provide me such greater flexibility that it would be the absolute fix-all for any issues or timing issues that we have, quite frankly.
Thank you very much, Brian.
You're welcome.
All right, so I think in interest of time, thanks, Brian, for answering so
You're
many
welcome.
questions, participating.
Thank you.
Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank
But I
you.
You're
think
welcome. Thank you.
a little bit after 4, I know we've all been wanting to talk to the moderator herself, Sarah Alger. So we thank you, Sarah, for coming today and sharing some of your wisdom with us. But if you could take a second, it'd be great to,
Sure.
I don't think you need a great introduction, but maybe describe what your role and duties are of moderator are.
So my role and duties are fairly simple. My role is to run the annual and special town meetings as they come up. I don't have any authority of anything outside of the actual room of town meeting. So I'm given a warrant. I don't have any control over what's on the warrant or order or anything. I don't make the recommendations. I just take the warrant and run through it and run the meeting and oversee the voting. I appoint the alternate moderator. I do determine when we have a quorum. I make the decision as to whether or not we need to go into a separate room. I handle the non-voters. In coming up to town meeting, I field a lot of questions about warrant articles, what effect they have, possible amendments, whether items are within the scope of the article and can be discussed or not. And I help the town clerk after the meeting in assembling the record to submit to the Attorney General where necessary, and otherwise just to make sure we have an accurate record of the vote. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Well, that's helpful to know. I know Joe sent around some questions in advance that we've been kind of running through with everybody. So we'll just kind of kick down the list a little bit and then open it up to questions from the committee. But what do you
Sure.
feel that works well or is good about our current governmental structure?
I think what I would think is good about it, and you know, I don't really have a position about any of this, but what I think is good about the meeting is that it is really the purest form of democracy that we have left. It's the only way in which people can have meaningful input into their government other than voting for people. It does provide a way for people to have ideas or issues that they want to bring forward to do that. If people want to be involved, it allows people to be as involved in their government as they want to be.
Excellent.
I think that's the basic, you know, being able to come to the meeting, feel strongly about something, get up and talk about it and potentially influence the way that issue is acted upon.
Excellent. Do you think there are areas of town meeting that don't work well?
Well, I think in today's life, people are very busy and not everybody values the ability to participate. And as a result, I think we sometimes don't get as much participation as I would like to see, as broad a cross section of the community as I would like to see. I think that's probably the downside. It's obviously, it's a commitment, you know. I mean, you have to be committed to your government to make it work. And if you're not, then it's not going to work.
I think that's well
True
said.
statement.
Yeah. It's probably like our best statement of the day.
Yeah.
To kind of play a little crystal ball, do you think there would be any benefits or problems that might arise if the town ultimately voted to change to town council?
So, well, I mean, because I'm from the Cape, from Barnstable, I've witnessed that transition from town meeting to town council. So I do have some thoughts about that. The benefits are that you don't have to wait for annual town meeting for things to happen. The town council would theoretically meet as frequently as the select board does, and could do things quickly, certainly more quickly than town meeting. The downside to that is that things can happen quickly without people even realizing that they're happening, and without people being able to have any input into it. But if people are not interested in their government and no longer care, then maybe turning over the power of the town meeting to a handful of people is what people would like to see happen. I can foresee it becoming extremely political, more political than it is now. I can see people becoming extremely disenfranchised. I can see ideas that currently have been brought forward and have passed and have been implemented, maybe never seeing the light of day. I know people complain about the select board. I'm not sure where we come up with, I assume we'd have more than 5 on a town council. I don't know how many we'd have, but who are these people? Where are they coming from? And what are they doing now? Are we going to be any happier with them? Are we suddenly going to find a group of extremely committed and brilliant people who are going to commit themselves to serve on a town council and make all our decisions for us? I have absolutely no idea, but that strikes me as something that could be a pretty significant downside.
Excellent.
Or can I,
Sure. So go ahead.
are you saying because the quality of the candidates are not out there, or people don't want to run for those offices? Is that what I'm hearing? I want to make sure I heard you right, and I might have missed that.
I assume there are people out there that are qualified and could do this. I would hope so. But are they going to want to run and be on the town council? I have no idea. I can tell you that nothing would interest me less. I don't know anyone who would be interested in doing it. But
Yeah, from a time perspective.
But there you have it. I
I
mean,
would
there are
agree that
people who are
different.
interested in being on the select board, so I guess so. I don't know. I don't think people are all that happy with the select board, so it makes me wonder why would we be happy with a town council? I have no idea, but it strikes me as a possible problem.
You want to defend your people?
So I guess does any of the committee members have questions for Sarah?
Yeah, I guess I
Sure,
can just
Rachel?
ask Sarah, the quorum at town meeting, that's been kind of a roundabout conversation that we've had off and on at different meetings. Do you think that getting the quorum right now is a challenge, or are there many town meetings in the past that you've overseen where it's been concerning if we might not make a quorum? Do you think that that is an issue that we're experiencing right now? I'm just curious, as well as our population is increasing, it's almost like our ability to meet the quorum is sort of diminishing a little, which seems counter.
Right. Well, there's no quorum for an annual town meeting. So
It's just the acting of certain articles. Yeah, sorry.
So it's only when we have a special town meeting that the quorum issue comes up. And I think that part of you have to have the issue that's coming up at a special has to be interesting enough, and enough people have to care about it to get the quorum. So it's more a factor of what you're discussing than I think it is the meeting, because we certainly get a quorum at the annual. So I don't know whether it's a timing, if it's a timing issue, if it's a topic issue. You know, the year we had, for example, a special for beach driving was one of the first years we couldn't fit everyone in the auditorium. We had so many people. But then you have an issue that isn't all that interesting to people and you're struggling to get a quorum. So.
Sure. Carolyn?
I don't know.
Hi, Sarah, it's Caroline Baltzer. I'm wondering what your thoughts are about, you were indicating that, people aren't as into town meeting as they could be, and so it's suffering. Do you think that if we switch to town council form of government, that it would engage people more and that people would become more positively oriented to a new form of government?
No, I just see it as a way for people to completely disengage and not be involved at all.
All right.
I mean, do you think people are going to show up and make public comment, or I don't know. I don't know. I don't think so.
I think that's what we're trying to.
But you might like the decisions better. I don't know.
All right.
Well, sorry.
Go ahead, Caroline. If you had a follow-up.
I'm thinking about what Sarah's saying, all these things, and what I'm gathering is if you don't use it, you lose it. And that, for some reason, and this is not our purview, we've decided in this, committee, for some reason, over a long period of time, the citizenry has stopped using the town meeting in a robust way. And so in part, that's why it's become inefficient. And so if we're changing to a different form of government, it's because mostly we're looking for efficiency, greater efficiency, so that it can be more representative of people's interests and, do a better job overall. And therefore, if we switch to a town council form of government, we would want to see that format and the way that people interact with it increase people's interactions and ability to air out what concerns them and communicate with the people who are representing them. And we want to see efficiency about how they are represented.
All right. I think Tom had a comment or question.
Hi, Madam Moderator, it's Tom Dixon. Just a quick comment or
Hey, Tom.
question. Very heard about the select board comments, of course, but.
I'm sorry. It's not directed at you, Tom.
I know,
It's not directed
totally
at anyone in particular.
Totally kidding. But I just had one question for you. Something that I'm in my first year, something I've been thinking a lot about is sort of kind of the future of folks who serve in town government. Because for all intents and purposes, select board is pretty much it, although it is a stipend and health insurance, which is not nothing, of course, but to do that while you're working and all the other stuff that life throws at you, and if it were a town council, it'd be similar, or it might even be more duties because town meeting would not be a thing at that moment, but at that point. But something I've been thinking a lot about is kind of who younger folks and getting them involved and like who are the next crop of Nantucketers who are going to take over. And I just sort of mean that rhetorically, but I'm just curious from your end, how you think you're so good at doing your job as a moderator. And I know you have a long history and you're an attorney and you take it very seriously, but how you approach the sort of thought of succession planning. I know it's an elected position, but how you think about that and make sure that the position is well taken care of into the future if open town meeting is the form that we still have.
Right. Well, obviously, I'm not in charge of who my successor is. However, I have attempted in the last couple of years to engage some younger people and try to get them kind of more up to speed on the process and hopefully interest younger people in becoming my successor. I think having Shanta Flaws-Murphy act as my alternate moderator has been a way for me to show her what the process is, get her face in front of the community, develop a comfort level around her, and with the idea that when I, am no longer doing this for whatever reason, that she'd be in a position to run for it and to take it over and kind of have a seamless transition. I don't know if that's what you meant, but that's been my thinking in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that was exactly my point. And that's sort of another one of your, in a position like yours, another maybe unspoken duty that you have, because, you know, I would imagine you feel like you would want the, I don't put words in your mouth, but you want the office to be in good stead as it passes to someone else. So, yeah, it's just
I do.
yeah, I would just kind of sort of in general, like that there's some things about these kinds of positions that some people don't realize on the surface, and I would just think that would be one of them. Anyway.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, Tom, but you're right. You're right.
I'll get to the public one second. Anyone else on the committee have questions? I just have one, and then I promise I'll open up to the public.
Can I answer one question that somebody raised about why do we have all these non-binding things on the warrant?
Sure.
Well, once somebody puts a warrant article in with the requisite number of signatures, the select board doesn't have a choice as to whether or not to put it on the warrant. And
I know.
then once it's on the warrant, I don't have a choice as to whether or not we discuss it. I do attempt to let people know this is non-binding. I always try to convince the article sponsor not to go forward. We always have conversations about that ahead of the meeting. But a lot of times people don't care that it's non-binding. It's an issue that they want to get out and they want to discuss. It is super frustrating to spend a lot of time on non-binding issues. I agree, but it's also kind of part of the deal, unfortunately.
Right.
Anyway.
Well,
Is there, well,
go ahead, Joe.
are there communities that are allowed to not include them in the warrant? I mean, is that state law?
Not in Massachusetts. Yes. Yeah.
Real quickly from me, it's a question I've always wanted to ask you, and hopefully you'll answer. What are your thoughts as moderator when we have articles that finish up that were kind of the hot article for the meeting, and we watch the mass exodus of people that leave?
I think that's okay. You know, I'm one of the people who thinks that's okay.
Okay.
Because I think people should be able to decide what they care about and come and vote about the things that they care about. And if they don't care about the things that are coming up and they're willing to hand over their decision-making to the handful of people that will be left in the room, then I respect their decision to do that.
Right. You've had your hand up for a while, but
I don't love it. I don't love it, by the way. I don't love the fact that people walk out. I wish that everyone would come and stay for the entire meeting. But I respect their right to do that. So, and you know, just quickly, we've tried and we can try again. We've tried things like having childcare. You'd be surprised, you know, people wouldn't leave their children with people they didn't know, or they didn't want to have their children out at night, which I completely understand. We did buses one time to try to bring people so that to alleviate the parking situation. And it's amazing how things like that just don't work. The Saturday meeting probably works the best for stuff like that, because you can have childcare in the gym, or you know, one time we were having a meeting and it was a Saturday and we wanted to have food carts, and the school wouldn't let us have the trucks on school property. So by the time we figured out where the trucks would be, they were so far away that by the time people walked there, got food, ate it, and came back, we were looking at like a 2-hour break. So all those things, it's frustrating. There are things we could do, and I'm willing to help work on anything that anyone has an idea to do. But I will say that you just would be shocked at where the opposition and where the difficulty comes in. It's just always shocking.
Okay.
Suzanne Girardi, there's a lot of talk about why the town meeting participation is down, and understandably, but I feel like there's been suggestions from the community itself that we aren't adapting to how a younger generation communicates, and that is electronically. You know, we've had some hybrid meetings and we're having one right now and stuff. Has that been a consideration to amend the current government to allow those people that are working, that can keep track of something and then still have some secure way of voting to still participate? I guess instead of abandoning what has allowed people freedoms, keep it intact and then allow other people to communicate the way they do communicate. These younger generations are all computer, phone savvy, whatever. You know, I prefer not to, but that's me. So that's.
Well, at the moment, Massachusetts law doesn't allow that, except in the case of representative form of town meeting. So that would be a possibility if we went to a representative form of town meeting where X number of people are elected as representatives. We would then have the ability to do Zoom meetings, voting electronically. People wouldn't have to come personally. The whole thing, we could do a hybrid. We'd have all kinds of possibilities. But just the same way that voting is now either by ballot or by mail, we don't yet have the ability to allow people to vote and participate in town meeting, an open form of town meeting electronically. I really applaud the select board for spearheading the funding to move to the electronic voting that we have. I think that's made a very big difference. Certainly has helped in the efficiency of the meetings, not to have all those hand counts. And it eliminates a lot of questions about whether things actually passed or didn't. So that's worked, but until they change the state law, we're kind of stuck with what we have unless we go to a representative form.
Thank you.
All right, Hillary?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks so much. Firstly, I just want to say it has been so fascinating to hear from the three guest speakers today. I so appreciate having them at this meeting and I learned so much. So thank you all very much. I've been listening to all these meetings and I'm really probably starting to be a bore because every time I ask, what about studying representative town meeting? And I'm going to kind of see if I can ask a question. I know Sarah made a few comments about representative town meeting, but I wondered if she had anything else to add about studying representative town meeting or her thoughts on how it's worked other places and my work for Nantucket. Thank you.
Well, I haven't given it a ton of thought or studied it. It does occur to me that there are ways that it could accomplish some of the things that people are concerned about. For example, if you elect however number of people we'd have to elect, at least 100, those people are then, by running, they're saying that they're committed, which means that they'll be at the meeting. So you wouldn't have the same issues with quorum. You wouldn't have the same issues of people just coming for the issues that they care about and leaving. You'd hope that your elected representatives would do just what your current elected representatives do, which is show up, be informed, be engaged, and make decisions in accordance with their constituency. I mean, it probably has some of the same issues that a town council form of government would have. But instead of having a dozen people, you'd be having tens, if not hundreds of people. I don't know if that's what you were looking for, but that's what I think.
Awesome, thank you.
I think you should look at it in addition to looking at, if you're looking at a town council form of government, you should look at a representative form of town meeting. The big issue that I see with that I just never have gotten my head around, maybe Nancy Holmes has, is how would people be elected? Would our form of how we elect people have to change? Would we have to be in precincts, and with how much of a pain would that be? Or with now with all this mail-in balloting, would that be taken care of? I just have no idea.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would just say that might be a great thing for the Collins Center to advise on. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Any last questions for Sarah? Sure, Lucy?
Yeah. Hi, Sarah, this is Lucy Hatter. I'm a big fan of the town meeting. That's the only reason I want to keep town meeting, because you're still there. So I have a question. I love the way you hold everything together. So, one of the things that keep coming up is educating the public ahead of time. Do you have any thoughts on how we could do more of that? I know the building association has something, the Civic League, but I don't know if reaching out to the Athenaeum or the NHA, like big areas to hold something, along that. Do you have any thoughts on that? And then the second part is, the other thing that's been coming up too is scheduling more town meetings during the year. And is that something that you think would work as well?
Well, so in terms of education, it's hard because everything is sort of, I guess you'd have to wait for the warrant to come out. So you'd have a couple of months in the now until the spring, until the meeting. And I'd certainly be willing to participate in anything like that. I just don't know if people are interested in that. I think the papers do a pretty good job of covering the articles that are controversial. I don't know. To be brutally honest, I just don't know if that's what people are looking for, because it doesn't seem as if people take advantage of the opportunities that are currently out there. So I'm not sure adding to that would help. In terms of having more meetings throughout the year, that's actually probably not a bad idea. You could break it into various segments. You could do all the financial stuff at the annual. All the things that need a quorum, do at the annual. You could have a zoning meeting, you could have a real estate meeting, you could have a home rule petition meeting. I guess the downside to having a lot of meetings is that it does require a fairly significant mobilization by a lot of people. And to do that twice a year is challenging. To do it more than that might be just putting too much stress on town resources. And honestly, it's a challenge for the school, because the school is so crowded now. They're using all the rooms for classrooms. So when we come in and take up the gym and the auditorium for a chunk of time, it's definitely challenging for the school.
Right. Last question for Mr. Gillette.
Madam Moderator, Sarah, Ted Gilletti, I just had a question regarding seasonal residents. And I'm just wondering, what's the experience, do you know, in, if you do, in Barnstable? They get
They're completely uninvolved in their government.
Okay, and they have no opportunity to vote as well, when you say uninvolved?
No,
Interesting. Okay.
no, they don't vote. And I mean, I assume that they can go to meetings with the town councilors, and I would assume the town councilors reach out to that segment of the community to get their concerns, but they don't have any more input than they do on Nantucket.
Great, thank you.
Curtis had a follow-up comment?
That's correct. Seasonal people can go to the town council and speak. If you watch the last, live stream, they spent an hour of people speaking who were not, year-round residents, but they cannot vote. The council actually votes.
All right, excellent. All right, Sarah, thank you so much.
And
for
they
your
don't
time.
vote for the councilors either.
Yeah, correct.
No.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, Sarah.
Thank
It's been great.
you.
We'll let you off
Thank
the
you.
hot seat for a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you all for doing what you're doing.
This has been immeasurably helpful. So, thank you. All right, so with that, the next item on our agenda is a discussion with Anthony Wilson from the Collins Center. I know we had some updates, and it looks like we have a few of his teammates that are there. I know you and Joe had a little bit of a back and forth prior to the meeting, Anthony, and that the town is put you guys under contract with us. So, tonight, the vote is, so hopefully the select board will vote that through and we'll be off and rolling. But with that, I'll turn the floor for a little update from you.
Sure. So I'm joined with two of my colleagues who I believe everyone on the committee has met at the last meeting that we attended to sort of give an overview about the Collins Center, but as well as the charter amendment process. Mel Kleckner, as well as Patricia, Patricia Lloyd, who's also on the call. I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues to speak in a second, but I want to just give a brief overview about sort of what we've discussed in terms of how we can assist this committee moving forward. So sort of number one, at the highest level, the Collins Center works as a resource, both in terms of research, in terms of best practices. We don't provide legal advice, but we look at language from communities across the state. You mentioned a couple already, Barnstable in particular, and things of that nature. We have the current contract will be for 10 meetings for us to physically, or in this case, virtually attend. And between the meetings, we will have conversation, usually through the chair or the co-chair, about issues that the committee would like to have researched, perhaps have our thoughts in terms of best practices or how that might work in practice. And so that happens between the meetings. We also usually coordinate with the chair or the co-chair or whoever the designee is in terms of which meetings you'd like us to attend in terms of hitting your deadline. I think you intend to end before or have a recommendation for the 2025 town meetings. I think that's, if I may be having that incorrect, but that's what I thought. So that's sort of the plan of attack sort of going forward. Before I turn over to my colleagues, just a couple of very interesting things that we heard. So the other thing is, the way we operate, we come, and even if, we were scheduled to speak here at 4:30, but we like to really be at the whole meeting for the meetings that we're at, listen to the back and forth amongst the committee and the things that you are hearing and learning about. And that helps us as we think about what information in the form of memos, or even if it's just talking points during the meeting, the information that we will provide. So having said that, I did want to say, just to commend you on really a well-run meeting. You had a very interesting number of speakers, and it sounded like this is part of an extended process that has gone on for some time here in the town of Nantucket. A couple just FYIs for the committee. While the conversation was going on, and again, this is something that which sort of traditionally do, is we took a look at Barnstable, their charter, and just somewhat of just a distinction just for the committee to mull over, is that there is a mechanism in the charter under their citizens participation provision, which allows the citizens to call a meeting, in a sense, to be heard, but not in the sense that you would have a town meeting in a community like Nantucket where the community is the legislative body and votes on the ultimate outcome. The section that I believe was being referenced was about is about which it reads as if the community can call a meeting where they can have their through the town council where they have the ability to be heard, but not necessarily to vote on anything specific. There is also provision in their charter, the citizens petition provision, which allows this a certain number of the citizens, I think it's 10% of the voting population, to submit items that the town council has to vote on up or down. So there's a number of provisions in there, a number of mechanisms for the residents to be heard and also to have items brought before the body. And then on the issue of the precincts, another very interesting conversation that you guys are having, which has happened in other places. Just a bit of information for the committee. Elections is governed pretty holistically under state law, and there's this particular provision about how precincts are created, and it really puts that in the hands of the select board. So, we don't tell you which way to go. We provide advice and information, but if you went in the town council route or a route where you sort of divide the community into districts and elect district representatives, there's a mechanism in state law that really through the select board would determine, or whatever entity is created through that, how the community would be divided for these electoral purposes. We have several questions for you guys because we want to get to know you, get to understand what the issues are. But before that, I do that, I want to turn over to Mel and Pat if there's any comments or thoughts you want to share with the committee.
Sure, I'll turn it to either of you guys, whichever one of you wants to go first.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. Good afternoon. And we also, as Anthony said, we really do value the discussion that happens in meetings like this evening. We like to read your minutes, watch meetings if they're taped and so on, because it gives us a flavor of the issues that are going on. As Anthony did mention, and I heard many things this evening from various parties that we need to clarify. There's a lot of terms that are thrown around that are understandable, but one of the aspects I think that the Collins Center can bring is some education and some general understanding so that everybody knows what, when you say city or you say council or you say town meeting, there's a legal definition for those and a practical definition in various forms of government. So we really think it's important that everyone is playing from the same level of understanding. Further, we do need to understand how we will tailor our services and the kind of analysis that we provide based on what you want to know or what you want to consider. If you don't want to consider an open town meeting, then that takes that off. Or if it's representative, then we can go from there. So we do need to understand, and we think it's perfectly fine that you haven't done that as of yet, and that you're listening to people, especially the people you've heard from who have a lot of investment in the local government. So with that, I will turn it over to Pat and have some of her thoughts.
Thank you. Like Anthony and Mel, I guess we're very interested in hearing from you in how we can help you and where you are at, and if you have narrowed down what you hope to consider at your meetings. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. I also thought I had a couple of initial thoughts from hearing your discussions. And one, as Anthony said, there are a number of resident participation mechanisms that can be implemented in a charter for a council manager form of government, such as, Barnstable's fairly unique opportunity to convene an entire town meeting. There's also something called free petition, which may be a little less onerous, where a lower number can require an issue to be discussed at, town council. there are things in between. There are referendum and citizens petitions. And so there's a number of opportunities to round out a charter with resident participation mechanisms. And we can go through those, further on if that's something you're interested in. The other thing I heard is a discussion of, do we need to have precincts if we did a representative town meeting? Right now, the general kind of model representative town meeting is governed by Massachusetts general law, which contemplates precincts. So I don't know that we're familiar. So right now, the way the law is, precincts would be required. But technically, it would really depend. We would have to have more discussions and more research on this. It hasn't been done, and it might be difficult to overcome that presumption of precincts with representative town meeting. So it's not a final answer, but it's traditionally what's done, and it's what the current statute requires for the model representative town meeting. But we look forward to hearing more from you.
I think Curtis had a quick question.
Yes, thank you. I'm really curious to know if there is a community or communities with representative town meeting that allows electronic voting. Is there anyone that now does it? And if so, how do you qualify as a voter to vote electronically?
Mel, go ahead. Mel, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was a town administrator in Brookline, which is a representative town meeting, and especially during the pandemic and now continuing, they have meetings where members, if they register in a certain way, they could vote. They had the ability to vote over the Zoom. I'm not sure I understand if there's another kind of electronic voting you're referring to.
What's a community that has voting representative town meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Yep, I think
through you to Curtis, do you mean if there were representative town meeting do you mean town meeting and then folks could vote from home, like on an online ballot?
What I've been hearing is that someone said representative town meeting would allow remote voting.
For
Yes.
them.
Yes, we did that consistently throughout the pandemic.
And how do you do
Several
it?
meetings in Brookline that members voted online.
Just the representatives or others, all citizens?
No, just representatives. It was just like a town meeting, but it was done.
But it was only the representatives, the 100 to 200.
Correct.
Now, no, Brookline apparently has a representative town meeting form of government. And how do they vote?
Well, that's what Mr. Kleckner was, the town manager in Brookline, and that's the one that does the electronic voting.
We were forced to do it during the pandemic, really, and have continued to have, I believe, some hybrid meetings there. I'm no longer there, but they had many town meetings that were handled over Zoom technology.
Are you just curious about if it's a
I'm
verified,
curious. I mean,
verified person, like
people
how
are
do they know
saying-
it's verified?
Well, people are saying you can vote remotely, so I just want to know how many towns do it, or is it just Brookline, or is it a common model for representative town meeting?
It's not really common, but during the pandemic, it was very common. But I do believe that many people found there was value as we're having value in this having this hybrid meeting and having town meetings hybrid. So Brookline and other communities have continued that process really for convenience more than anything.
And just to give another example, I'm from the town of Reading, and I was on our I was a town meeting member for many years, and we voted from home on Zoom during the pandemic. However, many people chose to go back to in person at the end of the pandemic. And so that was a town choice. However, I just want you to be aware there are some reasonable accommodation. There's a memorandum by the state. So if even in an open town meeting, there can be a requirement to accommodate certain people under, under an open town meeting to vote from home.
I don't know anything about that.
neither, maybe we could like it in a service dog.
Right.
Get all
Carolyn?
it.
That's a felony.
It's inspired by the joking, because we just heard from our town moderator, Sarah Alger, who clarified, I wish was something I didn't know, that you cannot do electronic voting if you are doing a open town meeting, but you can do it if you change to a town council or a representative town meeting. So that, Pat, what you're saying is during the pandemic, there was an accommodation, or are you saying that there are certain subgroups that can be accommodated, and if so, who are they?
So what I can do is I can send you the memorandum that the state has. And that says that even in open town meetings, there may be accommodations required under the Americans with Disabilities Act to allow people who cannot attend to vote. But that would just be a specific subset of people who would qualify under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that would apply to both. Although in general, electronic voting from home is only permitted in representative town meetings because those individual people can be verified that that is them and they are voting, and they're not just opening it up to, people calling in from randomly. So one of the reasons why an accommodation is allowed is they may be able to verify a specific person who's unable to attend can vote from home. Now, there's two definitions of electronic voting, and I think that's where Mel was concerned, what we were getting at is there's voting from home, but there are also electronic systems in place during town meeting to vote. And some towns have adopted the ability to vote, with a clicker, yes, no, and it sometimes speeds things up a little bit, especially for roll call votes. But that's a different type of voting, and I don't think that's what the question had
We
in
do
mind.
that now.
Yeah, we do that now. Yeah, Nantucket's a community, we use the on-site electronic voting.
Not always. We didn't have it for 2 nights last time.
Yeah.
One thing passed by one vote and it's questionable.
Oh, yes.
I happen to go to the bathroom.
Does anyone else, do you have a question? Anyone else have any other questions for the Collins Center? Do you have anything else for us?
We have a couple of things, I guess, that we want to touch on. I think one more operational aspect, just to think about as you're considering these forms. Just a couple things on just the representative town meeting. I would say that it's a form of government that the trend is maybe that it's not increasing. I don't think there's been a new representative town meeting in the last 40 or 50 years. No town has sort of moved from open town meeting to that form in that time period. And then number two, and Mel, please chime in if I'm saying something out of turn. But I think one of the things that we've heard is sort of a challenge for the open town meeting, is that because there are so many members of that representative group, it's hard for the electorate to know who their representative is. So the sheer quantity of representatives in some ways dilutes the representation, in that a lot of people just don't know who to go to, who's the representative. Mel, correct me, am I out of bounds on that?
Well, and I'm going to say Brookline again, because it was a large town meeting. We had over 250 town meeting members, and they had precinct meetings and so on, but it was difficult to create that kind of connection that way. I will tell you that in representative town meetings, and in Brookline's case, and places in Eastern Mass like Arlington, Lexington, Needham, places that have representative town meetings, they're meeting possibly 20, 30 nights in town meeting during the year. So it's definitely a different animal than an open town meeting.
And then, we are actually very curious in, and I know, I guess we're at the tail end, but I guess we're curious to understand sort of where you guys are at in terms of your process and where you want to go. It sounds like based on the meeting, and we've looked at some of the meetings, some of the minutes of your previous meetings, that you may still be sort of comparing the differences between what you have now and other possible forms, and even thinking about modifying what is in existence currently versus changing the form. I'm just curious if there are any, what the committee would say.
Committee knows the answer to that question, do
No,
we?
we know the answer to that.
Oh, I
Like
think that's fair to some degree, that we've been kind of fact finding in that and having a bit of that discussion. And I think the intent of the speakers we had in was to help answer some of the unanswered questions that we had about the existing process and the potential change. I'm sure other committee members have varying opinions. If anyone wants to
Well-
share, sure. Roger?
In my view, we've had a government study committee, which we have to have. We have to impanel one, I think, every 5 years or everything. And so we are informed about some things that they would like to see changed, which I think shouldn't be ignored in our process because they've done a lot of the work for us along the way to tell us what works and what doesn't. You know, the recommendations are saying, here's some things that don't work. So I like that about kind of including the work that that group has already done. And so that's just what I wanted to make sure that we continue to have
Well, it's
you
on the
from the
warrant.
government.
It's on the warrant again.
Well, some of them. I just think
Well, we
there's
have
more
to,
than
but-
the last one. There's one from 2017, there's one prior, and I don't think everybody's looked at all those and considered
okay.
what.
Yeah, I think it's just good if we
Recommended.
keep having people who are on those committees to
Yeah,
give their
absolutely.
perspective, because I think we did try to reach out to the public and talk, and there's no reason that we shouldn't recognize the flaws in our own charter if we're trying to completely change it. I mean, and I just want to make sure that we don't ignore those findings as well, but.
Did you comment?
Yeah, last meeting we discussed the representative town meeting. And it wasn't on our purview, and that's kind of the conclusion that we made about it. And so I think the issue on that is pretty much settled. I don't think we can study that per.
Well, you can
The
turn
article.
down this article and not recommend it and then come back in another year and play with.
Yeah,
whatever you want.
I mean, I'm just speaking for myself here, but if that's the case, then vote it down. Vote what we're doing down, form a new committee, study that. I think we have to forge ahead with what
Well-
we're doing. Go
I
ahead.
hear
Yes,
what you're
but I
saying,
think
and
we
I'm
would
not-
have the pros and cons of why we would, like, if we're not looking for a council, then we would say, well, we would more move to a representative because of these reasons, and that would be the foundation to establish a different study focus. So I still maintain that even though our focus and the way the article is written and what our charge is to study the council, it's almost like you have to look at the other forms outside of you to do that anyways. So, I mean, I think we're sort of doing that as part of the conversation. It's still added, you know, I mean, there's different things about representative that I've had to look up and understand because I don't see many towns with it, but it's helped me understand why, okay, well, this is why town meeting might work better or council works better for Nantucket. So I think it's just a natural part of the conversation without it being a yes or no, if that
Yeah, it's a good thing.
makes sense.
Well, let's put it this way. Bottom line is, if we come together and we all say we want to go to a town council form of government and we do a warrant article, and we've got to take it to FinCom, and then we got to take it to select board, and we got to take it to planning board,
Mhm.
and we got to take it to the voters, we need to know exactly why we're not doing everything else. So that's my only thing about including information on it,
True,
but not on, I'm not saying we're putting forward an article to recommend.
it's true, but we do have limited resources and I
Yeah.
don't want to exhaust.
Oh,
what
I
they're
agree with
doing.
that.
And they're basically asking us at this point, like, where we're at, so.
Sure, Carolyn?
I'm just thinking about all the speakers that we had and my takeaway from at least two of them was that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I remember John Giorgio saying, well, unless you have a really compelling reason to change the form of government, you probably shouldn't do that. That's how I understood it. And so when I'm listening to Sarah Alger and I'm listening to Brian Turbot and a couple of things that other people said, I'm just open. I'm trying to take all the information in, but that gives me pause, especially since they both really know it. And so if we're not finding a definite increase in efficiency, then I feel like I want to be persuaded by our group or Curtis or other people who are
The group.
well, no, well, but we see you as a representative of the article, so, I myself don't see that we are definitively at this moment in time, having heard from those people saying, yes, here's a really huge, good reason that we would go and try to persuade people to make this gigantic change. But that's just where we are right now, in my way of looking at it.
Well, one more thing.
Sure.
Are you also gonna advise on the process for changing it? Like, there are two ways to do it. Is that also in your purview?
Yes, I'm saying yes.
You're smiling at me. I don't know.
I'm saying yes for some hesitancy.
But they won't legally tell you which one to choose.
That's okay. You don't need to tell us which one to choose. I just hope we have a really full understanding about the process and how to do it.
Yeah, and so I think the only reason I'm saying it with hesitancy is because you're essentially on the path to what we call sort of the special act route, and that depends on the types of changes that you want to make. If you are if you're going to a whole new, there's essentially sort of two broad ways to go about it, which is an elected charter commission versus a special act, which it sounds like this is more under, this is a warrant from the town meeting to have the select board create a committee. That committee will then send their recommendation to the select board to go to the next town meeting to go forward to the legislature for a special. So in terms of that broad process, you're on a specific track versus another one. If the track we're talking about is relative to the substance of the changes and how this committee can go from where it is now to making some form of decision, getting impact from the community, we definitely also do it, offer advice or strategies around that particular issue. Just sort of listening to the conversation that just happened, it sounds like, there are a lot of sort of individual decisions that will go into any particular charter changes. I'm not saying you will, but let's say you went and suggested a town council. There are a lot of individual decisions that happen in that process that would then under your current deadline would happen before next year. And so, we might recommend setting a time frame where you come to a decision about, are we going to look at a town council, which would then necessitate a whole process about sort of going through what those sections of that type of charter would look like, or we don't feel comfortable making that change and having a sort of a time when you'd make that decision.
Right. Okay.
I feel like we made that clear as mud for you guys, so.
Sorry. Mel or Pat, did you want to add anything in there?
All right, well, I think with the contract pending tonight, let's get the select board to approve that and get you guys under, and then I think for right now, we'll be in touch and plan in earnest to maybe have our full kind of kickoff with you guys. Maybe if not the next meeting, the following one. I know we have to put some speakers at the next meeting too, but in short order, but I want to also make sure that we have everything signed and put together to make sure that all of the stuff that Brian Turbot cares about gets taken care of. We stay on the up and up, and take care of it in that regards.
Right?
Any other last minute questions for anybody?
You do have a public comment.
Yep. Any last public comment or questions? Fair enough. Seeing none,
Move adjournment.
Second.
All right, by roll, Bill Barber,
Yes.
Rachel,
Aye.
Caroline.
Aye.
Curtis.
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Tom,
Aye.
Kelly.
Aye.
Perfect. We are adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, it's fine, obviously,
Yes.
there's no eraser. I go through like 4 pencils a week.
I mean, we don't have anything that says we're not meeting